been southbound, I've been hellbound, riding on the midnight train. Going too fast now, think I ought to slow down, standing in the pouring rain.
What's going on, guys? Tristan and Tony back with another episode of the One Hell of a Life Outdoor Podcast. Today we got our friend Mike Ambrose that we called kind of jokingly Dr. Buck last year because he actually is a medical doctor, but he knows a lot of shit about whitetail deer hunting too. So we're having him back on. He owns property in Iowa and has been deer hunting all of his life in Illinois, and just good wealth of knowledge to hopefully teach some good stuff about deer hunting tonight.
What's going on, dude?
Thanks for having me, guys.
Man,
How's everything going?
Thanks for coming on. We appreciate it. Good. You know, just living the dream, right? As they say.
That's right.
That's right.
That's all you can do.
So, you know, we were talking a little bit off air, and I mean, you've been super busy as usual. I'm not surprised. You know, I mean, like one time, Tony goes, "How many hours a week does Mike work?" And I go, "All of them." Dude, he works all of them.
All of them, he's not sleeping.
All of them that he's not deer hunting. You know, and that's just the way it goes. So anyway, but no, you know, you guys, this guy is, I've hunted with Mike. If you haven't listened to us before, you know, Tristan's hunted with him since he was little. I've hunted with Mike since he was probably 16 or so. And, you know, if you haven't heard that story before, go back and listen to that podcast. But no, dude, this guy's a hunting machine. He's a killer. And I don't mean that in like a mean way, people. All right. But he loves to hunt, and you know, he became passionate with it. I've watched this guy grow up and talk about what he wanted to do when he got older in life, and I've watched him happen. I watched him make it real, and you know, now he's in a position where he's got some wonderful property up there, and where the land of the giants are, and so what is going on up there? It's not deer season.
It's not deer season. It's planting season right now. So, yeah. So we've been. This last week we finally got the beans in on the property, and then it rained for about the last 7 days continuously. So we're waiting to get the corn in. On my farm, it's 330 acres, and there's probably 30 acres of crop fields that we've got going in. About half of it's going to be corn, half of it's going to be beans, and then 5 of those 30 acres will be planted in some clover and some other green stuff and whatnot. So that's what we've been working on, is trying to get all the crops in.
Well, that's awesome. And I know, is that different than, because weren't you saying last time like the farmers that were around your property just like didn't plant the fields the same way, or was that your fields, or like was that the same?
Well, last year we had a drought, so I pretty much lost most of my crop last year. It wasn't a good year for deer hunting because of that, probably. Mm-hmm. And on my neighbor's farm, on the farm to the north of us, he plants alfalfa, which is really good early in the year. But then once it gets cold and things start to die off a little bit, then the deer don't hit that alfalfa field as much. And usually on my farm, there's nothing but standing corn and beans, and then some green fields with wheat and rye and some oats. And then we also plant some brassicas in the fall, and the deer will hit that like crazy once it's green, once it's the only thing that's green, you know. So hopefully this year we'll have much more activity. But last year we didn't have a lot of bucks. I mean, we had 2 deer that were probably 160s. We got hit hard because it was so dry with EHD. So I found
that makes it go up. I mean, like the viral spread of that.
Yeah. So when it's dry, what happens is, all of the watering holes and creeks and everything are starting to recede, and it makes that mud, it increases the amount of mud that's around the watering holes where the deer, drinking out of. Mm-hmm. And that's where that midge will proliferate. And then it gets on the mucous membranes, the nose, the ears, the antlers, and different places on the deer, and it bites them, and then it infects them. And I can't remember what, and then it can pass it from each to each other, or the midge can be transferred to and from deer. So I think it depends on your area, but I think in most areas, it's fatal in about like 20 or 40% of the time. Don't quote me on that, but but if they survive it, then if a doe survives it or whatever, then they have immunity to it. But there's some people that speculate that bucks are actually more vulnerable because they have all that growing antler with velvet, and that's hypervascular. And if a midge gets on the antler that's growing, it can transmit the the pathogen into the bloodstream, and it's more virulent or causes more problems in bucks. And that's why you'll see a lot of button bucks and a lot of 2, 3, 4-year-old, even older bucks that'll get this, and it's because they get infected with it in August time frame, whenever right before their antlers are hardening and they're shedding off all their velvet. So because I had one deer that was probably a 180-inch deer, this big 11 or 12 pointer, that I got 3 or 4 pictures of in August. First part of August, hitting a mineral site that I have on the south end of my farm. And then either he left, but he never came back, or he died. I don't know. I didn't find him during shed season this year. So either he left, and deer will do that, about that time of year, though. Some will leave and go to neighbors or a mile or 2 away. But my neighbor found I think he had 3 bucks on his creek bed that he found dead. And I was finding young deer, button bucks and fawns into November, first week in November. So because it was so dry at that time, from August, July, August, September, October. But there's probably at least 10 deer dead on my 300 acres.
Wow.
So
that's crazy. I mean, that seems like a lot to hear that number.
Well, what's the average density of deer per square mile?
I don't know. It's high because, I mean, I was sitting on one field that we have that's 5 acres. And this was during Christmas time, I had some family up. I wasn't even hunting. I was just out there sitting in my blind. And my nephew had his girlfriend up for Christmas, and he went to one field, and they weren't hunting either. They just wanted to see some deer and probably make out a little bit, I guess. I don't know. So,
yeah, the old let's go watch some deer trick.
Yeah. and they're only, as the crow flies, maybe 300 yards away from where I was, 200 yards maybe. And then my dad was sitting on another field. So we had 3 fields covered, and I saw 17 deer, and my nephew saw 14, and my dad saw another 20. So wow. I mean, and that's what, 60 deer and maybe 150, 200 acres. I mean, that's a lot of deer. So,
yeah.
Granted, we're the only food plots that were out there. It's a lot of green plots, but so it's nothing to see 20 plus deer when you go out, and who knows, and every field's like that. So a lot of them are does and fawns. We've got a huge, doe to buck ratio. So there's lots of does and fawns and whatnot, but there's lots of deer. But there's a guy on Facebook that actually has a drone. Have you seen this? I'm going to have to get some marketing dollars from his company, but we're going to give him a shout out here. I can't remember his name. I could probably look it up for you real quick, but he actually has a drone that it has like a thermal camera on it.
I think I've seen this, yeah.
Survey your property. They do it for like, injured deer or deer that are shot or whatever, and you're trying to find them. But out of season, he'll come and do a survey of your property, and he'll zoom in, find out if it's a buck or doe, and then give you an accurate ratio and basically fly over your entire property. And then you know exactly what your buck to doe ratio is and what your deer density is. So that would be I actually reached out to him. I'm going to see what it costs to do that. But that would be good information to know if you're trying to manage your herd appropriately,
Oh, yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. That, I saw somewhere where they were outlawing, because people started using that technology to like recover injured deer, like you said. And I want to say that one of the states put in a law where you couldn't do that. or something like that, or if you did find the deer, you couldn't go retrieve it or something stupid. Did you hear about that, Mike? Or
Yeah, there's some states that won't allow you to use a drone to get at least an injured animal for whatever reason.
Right. Which it seems really kind of odd because, I mean, what if you, I mean, anything you could do to recover that animal seems like the move.
Yeah, it makes sense, right? I mean, if they want people to benefit off deer meat and, help other needy families or whatever, you would think that they would allow you to use any means possible. But I think, who knows what the reasoning is behind it,
Yeah, especially if it's on public. I mean, I could see.
Is triple-tail fishing or flounder gigging on your bucket list? Williamson Outfitters is located along one of the most beautiful areas the Gulf Coast has to offer, known as Florida's Forgotten Coast. They are family-owned and operated and have over 200 years of combined fishing and hunting experience. They provide lodging, incredible coastal duck hunting, gator hunting, fishing, gigging, scalping, and custom boat tours along this beautiful stretch of Florida. Mention the One Hell of a Life podcast when booking and get 15% off your next charter, folks. Spots are filling up fast, so call or text Captain Chris at 850-251-8650 or visit floridaducks.com.
Insurance, lawsuits. I mean, who the hell knows? You might have a drone go down or something like that, and then someone file a lawsuit because it hit a tree or a power line, or who knows?
You caught your property on fire.
Right.
Like, check out this thermal imaging.
Yeah.
They seem to be hidden in this.
Someone finds a way to put a laser on a drone and just picking off deer or whatever.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, you're gonna have a bow connected to your drone. So you just, you actually do is you have a bow that's stationary and the drone pulls the string back for you, and then it chases your arrow and chases the deer.
Yeah, that's what I tried to do.
Automatic lock on.
Well, so we were shooting in the backyard last summer, Mike, and we'd got this drone, and I knew I couldn't keep up with the arrow, but I wanted to get this drone shot of my dad shooting, and then the arrow goes off, you're above them, and then you kind of drive up to the target, and I didn't account for how much time I needed to stop
in sports mode.
Yeah, in sports mode in the drone. So I just followed up there and then tried to hit the brakes and slammed it right into my brick wall of my house.
Dude, you want to talk about? I mean, me and him and Rob are out there shooting, and all of a sudden we're all just shocked equally. We all look at each other and go, "What the hell just happened, dude? What just happened?" And thankfully, it just cracked the lens cover basically on it. But I mean, it wasn't the drone he's got it's an older model. It's a 1080p, but it was something that he got as a wedding gift from his uncle. And anyway, we were like, heck yeah, we'll use it. You know? But
no, that's funny. Those I've got I can't even remember the name of it now, which company makes it, but I bought one of those drones that has 6, 8, 10 cameras or whatever it is, and it's nothing fancy. I mean, I think it shoots in 4K, and it was, when I bought it 3 years ago, it was one of the higher quality drones that were out there, but now they've got way better quality drones, but it has obstacle avoidance. It's constantly, surveying the area. It can go in the woods and follow you around as long as it can find a way to duck in between the leaves and the trees and keep up with you.
That's
you keep
crazy.
You keep this little dongle thing in your pocket or in your hand or whatever, and that's what it's picking up on, like a homing device. So I thought I would use it when I'm blood trailing deer and stuff like that, but I've just been too lazy and not gotten it out.
Yeah.
The problem with it is it only has a radius of half mile, 3/4 mile, so I can't really fly it over the entire farm like I want to, But
right.
But it's kind of cool, for if you want to shoot some B-roll or something, if you're on a tractor or whatever, it can just follow you for a little while.
Yeah. Yeah, that stuff's really neat what they can do with those. I've seen where they can set, you can basically go and set a boundary and just make it fly the boundary over and over if you want to. Or, people have set it the ones that are used for, people use them to spray chemical and shit, and they can set a boundary on it and then just make it do rows on the boundary so you're covering the whole thing.
Well, they have them now that are pretty powerful. They'll like lift up deer carcasses and pull them out of the wood, like lift them up on like a, you know, like a bag or whatever, and it'll fly
like
out.
a gurney or something.
Yeah, like a, you know, like a
World War II.
some sort of like medical emergency in like the Colorado mountains or something that pulls your deer out or something for you.
Yeah. When's the first hunter gonna be like, yeah, I'm too lazy to walk back to my truck, so I just fly with my drone over to my.
No kidding. I mean, you know, we cannot be that far away with technology where people are just like, all right, look, I'm not a bush pilot anymore. My drone is, and hop on, and I'm gonna do this from home, and we're gonna take you somewhere. Yeah, I mean, how far away? We can't be that far away from that.
It'll probably be safer too.
Yeah.
Well, they're spreading seeds and spreading the weed killer and all kinds of stuff.
He's telling every passenger, in case this mother goes down, you'll be screwed. I won't be.
Yeah. Yeah, that's one thing I'm not really interested in doing is like the single engine bushcrafts. It seems like there's way too many accidents with those.
Well, you can get a parachute now for your plane, you know.
Oh, that's good.
Well, that's the only way I'll do it.
Yeah, me too. I'd be riding with one on, period.
I've been seeing some crazy videos with people doing the paragliding or whatever, you know, when you're on the back of a boat and then you got that parachute and you go way up in the air.
Yeah.
And that's like some of the like scary videos about that are like insane.
Yeah.
Like you could totally die very easily.
Well, there was just an accident. I think, I don't know where it was, Florida or one of those coastal cities or whatever, but
it must have been
two teenage kids got their cord got whatever severed or cut or whatever, broke, and they went flying into a building, like one of the hotels on the beach. And they're both in the hospital. They survived it, but you know, it's you just never know.
Yeah,
you're out there to have fun, and something like that happens. So,
yeah, shit's crazy.
That's wild. So what kind of condition is the ground in this year going into planting time compared to say last year?
Well, we got the beans in, and then it got cold for like 2 or 3 days. So I think it was below freezing one night. So if they germinate, then we should be fine because we've gotten a ton of rain. Like in the last week, we've probably gotten 6, 7, 8 inches of rain. So a week and a half, whatever it was. So the beans should be fine. The corn's not planted yet, but I've got last year I was not successful at planting my own corn. It got too dry. I'm actually having the neighbor plant it. It's a little bit harder to get corn to grow. So, and I've moved my blinds a little bit and I'm going to actually put Egyptian wheat up as a screening to get to the blinds, so that you don't have to disturb the fields, you know, whenever you're walking in and out of. So I'll probably put.
Oh, that's smart.
Swaths, maybe. 15,
that's that real tall
wide.
stuff, right?
Yeah, and it grows like, I mean, it's a grass. It's a weed, basically. It'll grow 8-10 feet if you plant it in first part of like end of May or first part of June.
Wow. So
I'll till it up and fertilize and then plant it and rake it out, and then it's just going to be sections to the blind, and it's going to create, you know, a little bit more of a sanctuary for the deer to feed comfortably in, and also allow you to sneak up in the blind. I mean, you know, whether or not it'll actually help overall, you know, I think it'll provide a little more. I don't really have a problem on my farm with scaring deer because I don't overhunt any one spot, you know, and I always play the wind. And there's times whenever if I go out at noon, I'm still jumping deer off of fields. I mean, they're just out there all day, just feeding and laying down and feeding and laying down. And even if I scare them off, they're back within 30 minutes. It's like, oh, hey, what's up? And then they just walk off and come back later on. While I'm sitting in the blind. The problem is you can't do that to bucks, right? So they're gone if you jump them too much. But I move around just enough to, and if the wind ain't right, if the wind's not right, I won't hunt it. You know, if you're in a blind, it's less important. But you know, if the wind's not right in the morning to be cutting through, it's just not. The morning's a little bit tougher to hunt on my place because, you know, I can only hunt the north end, and on the south end, I don't really hunt around my house or the barn, which is the central part of the farm in the morning, just because you have to walk through fields to get to it. So I don't want to jump anything, but I will go out like 20 minutes after daybreak or right at daybreak. And I've got these little, it's like, some cheap $50 night vision. It's not even night vision. It's like, they use as like an infrared type thing. And you can see 100 yards across the field to make sure there's no deer in it before you go walking out there. But if there's deer out there, I won't spook them. I'm not using it to hunt. It's just surveying the field before I walk out there. And then if there's no deer out there, then I'll sneak in the blind or whatever. But it's just harder to hunt those fields in the morning, obviously.
What do you do if they stay there? You just throw a rock at them or something?
No, I mean, sometimes I've had deer when I'm out there on my tractor feeding in a field. They'll let me drive right by them, 20 yards. They're not worried about it.
Wow,
It's the weirdest thing.
That's crazy.
That's wild.
But if you were standing there, they'd probably.
Yeah, they're not scared at all of the tractors or even the four-wheelers sometimes. And then other times you drive out there and you just hear them taking off 100 yards away. It's like, well, you just don't know, but
it's so interesting, like just watching their behavior, even in real urbanized areas. Cause like we got this park that we go to that it's just full of deer and they'll let you walk within 5 yards of them. But if you stop and look at them, they'll, they run off. Yeah. But if you're just walking, they'll just keep feeding. I mean, it's just interesting.
That's why they do it over by me too. Yeah, we're lucky to both have these like really big parks by us. Like ours is like almost 900 acres.
Yeah, I think
of all woods.
Ours is like 230 or something.
Yeah, and it's beautiful, and yeah, it's crazy how close you get to all the deer and stuff. I had a doe come walking by me the other day when I was up running this equestrian trail, and she was so fat. I'd never seen a doe that fat. She had to have twins or triplets in there because she looked like a hippopotamus. When she was walking through the woods, I was like, this is big old belly. I was like, my God, look at that.
I've seen like probably 3 or 4 bucks over 140 inches on that park. And
I've seen some of the pictures.
It's nuts. I mean, and last summer there was a bachelor group of 3 of them, and one of them was an 11 pointer that was like probably, I don't know, 150 or something. But it's crazy just in residential areas, just chilling.
Yeah, no kidding. So let's take a step back for a minute. I want to kind of break something down here when it comes to the planting of crops and food plots and everything. So
yeah,
what's the first thing I got to do if I've got an area that's cleared off? What's the first thing I got to do is I got to test my soil, right?
Yeah. So I mean, if you had your own place and you got an area mowed, it's an old CRP field or whatever.
Yeah.
And I had several of those, and then I had some established ag fields, right? So, you have to, number one, test the soil, right? So, and you can plant right into like stubble and grass and whatnot. You just want to spray it first or spray it sometime after you plant, as long as that weed killer or that chemical that you're using is not going to stunt the growth of a.
In the outdoors, every detail counts. See sharper, aim clearer. From the river's edge to the heart of the flooded timber, Hook and Bullet has your vision covered. Hook and Bullet's purpose-built optics are flawlessly crafted to give you an edge regardless of your outdoor pursuit. Use code ZeroDuck30 for 15% off a pair of Hook and Bullet sunglasses today.
A seed that's not emerged yet. So,
yeah.
So what I did was I cut it all because I had some, if we're taking a field from scratch, cut it all and then send soil samples in and you're getting pH, NPK levels and maybe some other micronutrients or whatever. And then you're going to spray to kill everything and then you're going to plant right into it, right? Mostly you can use a drill or a planter or even throw it, right? Just, that's one way of doing it. And that can be a spring plot or it can be a fall plot, and some people till, some people don't. Doesn't really matter. I mean, depends upon what your preference is. In my opinion, if you till it or lightly till it, you're probably going to get a better standing crop that first year, but you're also denaturing the soil. You're robbing the soil of nutrients, right? So anytime you till it, you're creating runoff and you're losing nutrients in the soil. But in my experience, when I lightly till it, I get a better standing crop because you're kind of getting rid of the old stuff and starting fresh, you know.
I got you.
So, and that's what I did and so like this year, I decided on my smaller plots, I'm going to just plant with clover frost seed. So I went out in February, and I've got probably 3 smaller plots that are about 1 acre, and then one that's about 3 acres, so about 4 or 5 acres, and I planted all clover. So I made up my own clover mix. It has some red clover and some white clovers, and I put in a lot of berseem. So there's some studies that show that deer prefer berseem. It's a highly palatable. It grows well. And then also Balanza clover. So I put a lot of that in there. And it's an annual, so you get 1 or 2 years out of it. That's the bad thing about it. So people that want to grow more of a perennial 5 to 7 to 10 years of clover, they'll use more of a white clover. I'm not really worried about the extra cost of the seed. I just want to use the best preferred, clover for the deer, because that's what I'm there to do. I'm there to feed the deer, right? So right. I think the blend that I made was to my specs, and then I just go out there in February, March and frost seed it 8 to 10, 12 pounds an acre, whatever you want to do. And now I've got standing clover that's in some areas, I just was up there last week, 10 inches, 8 inches. I mean, it's decent clover. Wow. And there's still, weeds growing through it, but that doesn't bother the deer at all, but so it's not as pretty as some fields. But then what I plan on doing is going back through next time I'm up, and I've got some higher, some good protein, some mung beans, some soybeans, and what else did I use? Like some sort of pea, and also alfalfa. I'm going to drill that right in through the clover and see what takes. Just kind of, deer like. They like a smorgasbord. So when you think of a food plot, you shouldn't just be like corn and beans. That's fine if it's going to last. Corn and beans are great for an attractant throughout the year, but also late in the year, like the pods and the corn stalks and everything. The deer really love the corn. They like that late in the year, but on my other plots, I want to create diversity so they can have their choice, so it'll be clover as a base. Then I'm drilling some other things into it, which is buried a little bit from 2 years ago, but that's kind of the idea. And alfalfa is great until like the first. Deer love alfalfa. How many alfalfa fields you drive by, and up until November they're hitting it like crazy. You know what I mean? So that's kind of what I'm doing with my plot. But then I have a fall dedicated fall food plots, which I treat a little differently. I'm probably going to sacrifice some of the corn and beans that I planted and put a couple brassica plots in, because those will last into November, December, even first part of January. They'll be digging up a lot of the, purple turnips and collards and different things. So that way you want to keep the deer on your property all season long. You know what I mean? So
yeah, makes sense. So you're giving them food sources that throughout any time of the year, they're going to have something to go to.
Yeah. So springtime, you have alfalfa, clover, any type of, pea or bean or even corn. And then in the fall, I'll probably plant, I'll overseed with some wheat and rye and oats on those same clover plots just to see what takes. Mm-hmm. And then, in some of the bare areas or whatever, I'll put a lot of those wheat and rye oats, and then I'll also put I'll have some dedicated brassica plots, which, believe it or not, those are golden, man. I mean, and everybody, some people love brassicas, some don't. But in my area, I mean, you'll have deer just picking at those leaves once they start coming up like crazy, and they have a ton of. There's a lot of tonnage there. Like, they can't really keep up with the growth, which is awesome. So there's always green leafy brassicas on your food plot if you take care of them. And I'll fertilize them, and then I come back and I hit it with Deer Grow products. It's like a mineral blend or something like that, and it really improves the growing of those types of plots.
What kind of fertile? So a couple things real quick. So, like, going back to like soil preparation and stuff. I know, like,
Yep.
I remember looking at some soil that we had on a lease in Georgia, and the soil was so high in acid that I would have had to bring in like a ton of ag lime.
Yeah.
And honestly, it was just where the access to where we were at in this, you saw it down there. I mean, it was just, I just never did it because honestly, it was a lease, and I'm like, I'm not investing that kind of money into a lease, even though I could. I was just like, I'm not doing that. And, but a lot of times you got to do that to get the soil to the right pH level for whatever you're planting, right?
Yeah. So, on my smaller plots where I don't want to get like tractors in, I'll use Plot Start.
Mm-hmm.
And there's several companies out there. Deer Grow makes it. I mean, you don't have to use them by any means, but anything. And it's basically liquid calcium. And it's on the back of it. It tells you mix so many ounces of this stuff per acre, and it'll work for a season, a half a season. I mean,
okay.
And it'll raise the pH of your soil, and things will grow much better. And then you can use Plot Boost, which I'm not even sure exactly what's in it. It's not a fertilizer, but it has some sort of, some sort of compound in it that increases nutrient absorption and different things. And then you put that on as a foliar, which means after the plants start growing, you hit it with that, and that provides more nutrient uptake by the plant as it grows. So you have Plot Start, which is your pH balancer, and then Plot Boost. And there's other companies that make the same products. I'm sure they're all the same. You just market it under different names or whatever. But and it will improve the growth rate of your plants. Like I had a section of brassicas where I sprayed Plot Start to begin with it was like an acre plot that I had. And then on one section I used Plot Boost, and the other section I didn't. And the brassicas were twice as big, twice as much, green leafy, tonnage on top because I used the Plot Boost with it. And I think you can do that every 30 to 60 days. So it peaks out right at 30 days or something. So if you were to put it in there today, it would be peaking in 30 days. So you could hit it in 30 days. So it's peaking again the next 30 days, if that makes sense.
Yep.
And it's super easy to do. You 4-wheeler with an attachment, and it's not that expensive. I mean, but then you just spray it on. So you can't hurt anything by doing it.
Right.
So the smaller plots, that's what you can use Plot Start, which is a pH balancer, Plot Boost. But on my larger ag fields, I had to have ag lime brought in and spread. So you got to pay somebody to do that. And I put out this year, my pH was running between 5.2 and about 6 on most of my plots, and I had to put 2 ton per acre. So I mean, there's 25 acres. We had 50 ton of ag lime brought out.
Holy cow!
Yeah. It's I mean, that's what, like, I was gonna have to bring in, like, I don't know, it was more than that. It was like really high in acid. So you're trying to bring the acidity level down, and I was gonna have to bring in a lot. I was just like, nope, I ain't doing it. Yep.
Well, then also, and then you fertilize. So I mean, that's not cheap. I mean, I fertilized with it's an NPK mix, and they also put some sulfur compound in there or something. I don't know. I'm not an expert on this stuff, but and then you just you have a buggy that you drag around on your tractor, and it takes half a day to do it. It's not hard to do, but you have to do it.
Right. Well, cool, man. I was just I thought there's a lot of people out there. It's this time of year, and you might have just gotten a lease or something like that, and you're like, hey, how do I do something like that? How do I go about putting my own field down? What do I have to have done first? And big thing is just go have your soil tested first, and then you can take it from there. You just gotta do your research.
And brassicas too are a pretty easy plant to grow. They're pretty, tolerable to, poor soils, or if you don't have it prepared, you can. And I've had pretty high levels of thatch before where I've mowed, and then went ahead and overseeded with some brassicas, thinking, oh, this isn't going to do shit, right? And sure enough, it'll grow a decent brassica field. I mean, you can, and if you run into problems and it doesn't take, just put down a bunch of rye or wheat or oats or something. Mostly rye. Rye grows just about anywhere, and the deer eat the crap out of it. So it produces a ton of tonnage, so I mean it produces a lot of plant. And the nice thing about rye is it'll start growing again the next spring. So it comes up before clover does. Once the ground starts to unthaw a little bit, and the deer will hit that like crazy, and you'll find shed antlers on a rye field. Once they start dropping in March, whatnot, or early drop, February, March, April, whatever it is, you'll find. I found a couple of good sheds this year and last year just out in the middle of the field that were at rye planted. So there's ways to salvage it. Clover is easy because it's less maintenance. Rye is easy because I'll grow anywhere. Brassica grows just about anywhere for me too. So you don't have to have corn and beans and a lot of equipment, and just a little bit of elbow grease and some hard work, and you can grow something somewhere.
Right.
Yeah, that's good to know.
Yeah, no. So, let's also talk about, we're on this, about diet, and everything that deer need. One thing I know that was really important to you was setting up the right amount of the correct amount of habitat, when it comes to that. So what was you looking for? And I guess, what was you looking for when you were going to purchase a property? Number one, talk a little bit about neighbors and how that impacts that kind of decision and stuff. But then secondly, when you were looking for a property, what are you looking for? I mean, yeah, there's a lot of people who be like, all right, this property's for sale, $5,000 for wooded per acre or whatever. And you buy all this woods, and it could be good, it could not be. You're going to be a transition area, more than likely, or a bedding area, depending on the way it's set up. But what was you looking for? And then kind of talk about what, you've done to your place to make it that more of an ideal big buck habitat.
So what I wanted when I probably looked at 30 or more farms.
It's in the teens that morning, and maybe you're chasing ducks or geese. But now it's September and it's 85 degrees and you're hunting early teal or geese. As a waterfowler, you need dependable weather protection that will not break the bank. Founded in 1996, Frog Togs is not only the leader in breathable wader technology, but a company you can depend on to keep you warm and dry, head to toe, no matter your hunting environment. Stay bone dry by using discount code ZD315 for 15% off not only your first purchase, like most discount codes, but how about every single purchase you make from now until December 31st, 2024?
It was over a 2, 3, 4 year period, probably 4 or 5 year period. I wanted to make sure that it had a good history, so most farms now, if they're hunting farms, you'll have a trail cam history, and the assumption is that they're deer from that property, right? Which isn't always the case, but I'm sure for a lot of realtors or whatever. But if you go to some of the reputable realtors, you're going to get, pictures of deer that are from that farm or neighboring farm or whatever. So I wanted a farm that was for deer hunting. So I wanted to make sure there was some decent genetics on there, knowing that genetics aren't everything, but it's important, right? I don't want to wait 5 to 7 years to maybe have a dud of a farm. So I wanted to make sure there was some form of, trail cam history or harvest history where there were some decent bucks, 150, 160 inch, that was what I was looking for. And some people it may be 120, whatever your goals are, you know what I mean? Or maybe it's just deer in general. And then I wanted to make sure that it was set up with the neighboring farms where I thought it would be a good hunting farm. And access is probably up there in that decision making too, right? So making sure the house isn't on the back end of the property, that you got to drive through the property every time, or making sure that there's not just one giant food source on one side of the farm and you can't access it on the back side. You have to walk through the field to get to, an evening type of farm, right? Versus a farm that has some options, you know. So I wanted to be able to hunt morning, evenings, and I wanted some terrain features, and I wanted a creek, and I wanted, you know, areas to put in ponds, and I wanted some thick habitat, and I wanted some creek bottoms, and you know, that I wanted diversity within the farm, because, you know, that's what deer like, you know. A farm that can hold multiple doe groups also is important to me. Meaning, the bad thing about my farm, and makes it harder to hunt bucks, is that there's 5 food plots, right? So literally I'll have a good buck on one food plot, and I think he's hanging out in this patch of woods or this bedding area. And each food plot, the nice thing about it is it has its own set of bedding areas around it that I know exist. But, you know, you might see deer showing up 2 days on one end of the farm, and then you go hunt that area, and then he's on the completely other end of the farm, because there's 5 other food plots he's got to check out, right? So he's searching for does. So it makes it a little bit harder to hunt a specific buck, but it also creates that diversity for the deer herd, and you can hold more deer on your farm if you have 5 food plots or 6 food plots that the deer are feeding on, versus one ag field or something like that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, double-edged sword.
So I wanted a lot of diversity on the farm. I wanted some areas that can hold deer. I wanted some ridges. I wanted some cedar thickets. I wanted some creek bottom. I wanted some grassy fields, and that's what I was looking for, some diversity, you know.
Yeah.
Because I knew I could create the food plots that will bring the deer where I want them. And I think I pretty much got that with my farm, but, you know, and then I also wanted a place that I could, you know, as a side note, bring the family and have a good time, and, you know, all that stuff. That's important too. So,
right. Yeah. No, I remember.
You just have to make a list of things on your checklist, and start looking at farms and realizing what you don't like about it. Like, some of the farms didn't have good access. I mean, I looked at one farm where 80% of it was bottom ground. Well, if you're hunting in November after the trees have lost all their leaves, and you walk into a bottom, you know what that's like. I mean, you see 40 deer running away from you as you walk into a bottom somewhere. I mean, good luck trying to hunt those deer, right? You're gonna, they're gonna know where you're at all the time,
right?
You know? So it's real hard to hunt those deer, and even during the rut, I mean, it's all bottom ground, and your wind is swirling, and it's just hard to hunt deer. So I wanted some options when I was hunting.
Yeah, no, totally makes sense. And I think just the different points you bring up from, you know, making your pros and cons list is important too, because it's, I mean, that's, you know, so smart, because there's so many different, you know, aspects that you could really look at it, including how important it is to you, you know, like you were saying on the last podcast, like how much of a family place are you trying for this to be? You know, like if you don't care, just want to run 4-wheelers all the time, and then maybe you shoot a few does off of it, or are you trying to do what you're doing and shoot like a 180-inch buck, you know?
Right.
Yeah. And my, you know, I've not shot any 180-inch plus deer, but that was my goal. You know, I think the biggest deer I've shot is 150 to 160, and on public land, and I passed up a deer, you know. Since then, that was probably 160. That was probably only a 3 or 4 year old, and I'm sure somebody else shot him because I never saw him again. But I want my next deer to keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger, you know. So I'll pass up a 150, 160 all day long, in hopes that there's a 180. And one of my good buddies up there next to my farm, he lives down the road. He's helped me develop my farm, and, you know, I mean, he knows way more about hunting than I do, because he's been hunting on his own. He's got 500 acres there down the road from me. He shot 2 deer over 180 this year.
Holy cow!
Holy smoke!
Yeah.
What kind of what kind of hours is he putting in, or how, like, and what hours do you put into to try to give yourself that opportunity?
So one thing, you know, I used to think, and we sort of live by this hunting on public land, that, you know, you can't kill them from the camper,
right?
You can't kill them from the couch. but you can screw up a lot if you're out there and you shouldn't be. I mean, you can educate deer. So it's like, I think in my last 3 years of hunting, if I know a deer is on this part of the farm and it's not right to hunt it, I'm not going to go in there and screw it up. You know, it's just like, I'm not going to do it. So I may go sit on some other field that, you know, just watch deer or not even hunt or whatever, and hope to hell something shows up, but I'm not going to screw it up, because it's, you know, the one thing I've found on my place is that if you get busted by a decent buck, you won't see that deer there again for 3 or 4 days. You know, it's really weird. I mean, does and fawns, yeah, they come and go. They'll blow at you. They'll stomp at you. But you might see them the next morning. I mean, literally, you can tell it's the same group of does coming through or whatever. But bucks just don't act like that, you know. So I've learned not to screw it up. You know, I think if you over hunt an area, but during the rut, I mean, I'm up there. Last year, I was up there 2 weeks straight, and I hunted every day and night. With the exception of a few nights where it wasn't perfect setup, and I didn't have a particular buck I was after. Like I had a deer that was probably, he was old. I mean, looked like he was 300 pounds, but he wasn't. And he was like a forky, right? So he was just an old deer. I was thinking about, you know, taking him, but and then I had 2 deer that were probably 150 to 155, one maybe 160. And I passed them both several times, and there was one deer that was probably 175 that I was after, and as far as I know, he survived. I didn't even see him once from the stand, but I kept getting him on trail cams. But he, you know, my friend, he hunts a lot. I mean, he actually has access to more than 500 acres. So he has friends and other farms that he hunts. His, you know, some of his family members are you know, farmers, and he shot, and I actually helped him find this deer, but he shot a 182-inch deer first week in November, and had a good hit on it. And we thought it went this way. It was right at dark, and I wasn't with him, but when he shot it, and it turned out the deer turned around and went the complete opposite way and died within 150 yards. But and we found this deer, and he goes out 3 days later, hangs a stand on a neighboring farm he has permission to hunt, and he had trail cam pictures and sheds of this antler. There, this shed antlers of this deer that he thought might be over there. Had no idea. And he went out there and I think shot at his second set or first set.
Wow.
188 inches or 189 inches or something like that. Just an absolute stud of a deer, you know. And but he's got access. I mean, he's lived up there his whole life and has, you know, 500 acres of his own, and he has more acres that he can hunt. And he's very good at what he does. I mean, he goes out and finds shed antlers. I mean, I don't know how many shed antlers he found this year. It's got to be 80 to 100 shed antlers.
My God.
He spends a lot. Yeah, he spends a lot of time out there, you know, but he's got thousands of acres that he can shed hunt. You know, I've got 300 acres. He's got 500 plus all the farmland that his family has, and friends and relatives and whatnot. And he hits it all up at shed antler season, just so he knows what's going on.
Wow.
You know, but he's pretty insane about it, more insane than I am. You know, I would be that insane if I had the time and the energy, you know, but he's definitely got the passion for it, and he's got access to all that land.
Wow, man. That's nuts. It's always blown my mind, like, how the people that find sheds like that do it. And I guess it's just a time thing, and then also just kind of knowing the property and where you kind of can guess where they're going to be bedding, or, you know, where they're going to be hanging out eating or whatever. But man, I've only found one shed in my life, and it was blood trailing a deer in the fall.
Yeah, I think this year I found about not as many sheds, but last year I think I found about 15, and that was one full day of walking, and I should have been out. And you have to hit it up, you know, multiple times throughout the shed season. So you go out there early and mid and late shed season, and you You just got to walk a lot. I mean,
Yeah.
to find these sheds. You know?
Well, I was it just made me think, about the public lands in Illinois. Years ago they changed we walk up there to hunt one morning at the beginning of the season. There's a sign that says no bicycles allowed. And I said, that's cute. As soon as you take off walking, there's bike tracks. You're like, that's funny. So then a couple of years later, we show up and it's like, no taking sheds. I was like, that's even cuter. I'm like, kiss my ass.
Yeah, I don't quite understand that. I mean, I'm not a biologist
you can't
by any
impact
means.
the environment enough that you're robbing the squirrels of their calcium nutrition, bro.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, come on. We're worried about squirrels. We're worried about squirrels and rabbits getting calcium nutrition. Is that what it came down to?
It's insane. Literally nothing else to do.
I mean, I'm not surprised with the governor of Illinois. I mean, I'm not surprised. That seems like some left-wing shit if I ever heard it.
But, it does answer some questions about where these deer feel safe. I mean,
Yeah.
After a hard hunting season and pressure from maybe a lot of pressure, maybe a little pressure, but you'll find, and he's told me stories where he found that shed not too far from where he killed that big 189.
Yeah, it helps paint the picture.
And it was 2 years before. I mean, and it was there during the rut, and this shedding the season's 2 months later. But it just, it shows you that, and maybe it's because it's lower hunting pressure, it's private property, that deer really like to be in that area and felt comfortable there. But, I mean, after a grueling season and a lot of hunting pressure, potentially those bucks want to just hole up somewhere and lose their antler somewhere and, refeed and survive the late winter, so maybe I guess it does mean a lot where you're finding these sheds.
Yeah, well, I guess just like anything else, you got to put a little bit of strategy into it, right? And like you said, so a lot of us that aren't serious about it, we'll go out once when we think it's the right time to look for sheds, and then we don't find them. And we're like, dude, we suck.
Yeah, true.
Right? And then there's other people, like you said, that say, okay, well, I'm going to take a...
Do you want coffee that doesn't suck? Get the Duck. Dirty Duck coffee is made specifically for the waterfowl enthusiast. Enjoy flavors like Morning Wood, Dark Dynasty, Cinnamon Teal Snickerdoodle, and First Flight to unlock the flavor that you'll enjoy in the blind for years to come. Our friends at Dirty Duck Coffee Company are now offering all Zero Duck 30 followers a 15% discount when you use code ZeroDuck15 on your next order.
Different approach. I'm going to go 3 different times, and I'm going to make sure that I focus the majority of my time in the 2 areas where they spend most of their time, and that is their bedding and the feeding areas. So if you have property that's transitional, that you don't hold any of that, you're probably not going to find a lot of sheds. I mean, let's face it. I mean, you're just not,
right?
And but I know that I always heard that a strategy also is like walking fence lines. Yeah. I mean, when they jump, it just more chance that one's going to fall off. And
yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah, and I've even seen where people, I might be wrong, it might have been Lee and Tiffany, I can't remember who it was, somebody. They put their off-season feeders out, which is basically just like just imagine a piece of plywood with, 2x4s making a rectangle box. And you just set it up with grain in it. And you only put these out during the off-season. And what they'll do is, I think, they'll either do that or they'll put their feet on the ground. And then they kind of like imagine building like a U kind of with the hog fence.
Mm-hmm.
And they'll do that and put that on poles, so it's real sturdy. And a lot of times when the bucks reach down to eat, the food's right there. Their antlers hit that fence and helps them come off.
Knock it off. Yeah.
Yeah. I saw that as a strategy somebody was doing one time. I was like, oh, that's pretty smart. So there's somebody out there going, that's cheating.
Yeah, I mean, I've found just about anywhere in a creek bed, or when they go down a hill towards the creek bed, or coming up on the other side, it jars one loose or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And I also like little cedar thickets on the edge of those cedar thickets where they're ducking under cedar trees and whatnot. And running through the brush or whatever, they'll knock them off. I've got this one little bitty. It's about, I don't know, 150 yards off my north food plot. That's about an acre that I have set up with nice little pinch points and rubbing posts and everything right along it. And I find them there every year, and it goes down to this bottom where it gets thick. So the trails kind of come in this little saddle area, and then it drops off, and then it gets thick, and then it crosses a creek, and that's where I actually found when I bought the farm, I actually found a dead buck there that was probably 170 inches.
Wow.
And and I that was when I was scouting the place before I even bought it. And after I bought it, I came back and found the shed. It was a deadhead. So either somebody had shot it or just died of old age or whatever, But so yeah, those little, what I have found is that deer like, terrain features, but they also like habitat changes. So, when you find a grassy field that goes up against some thicker brush or a thicket or whatever, or a thicket inside of a wooded area, or, a thicket along a creek or something like that, where the habitat changes, the deer like that, right? Because they can use the change to their advantage or whatever, So,
yep.
You walk those areas and you'll find just trails, just paralleling that area, inside the woods. If you find a thicket next to an open stand of timber, and sure enough, there's a run going right by it. That's like the thicket up at where we used to hunt, Tony, that park. I mean, you look at I guess that'd be the west end of that thicket. There's always a trail running through it. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So, and you just see that all the time.
Yeah, for sure. I think something that's interesting is, again, we always talk about the reality of hunting, right, Tristan?
Right.
It's interesting that here's Mike in like property that he handpicked, doing everything he can like a psycho to try to shoot a giant buck.
Mm-hmm.
And if you guys are paying attention here, I mean, Mike's been, you're going on your 4th year on this farm?
Yeah.
So you're
this
third.
3 hunting seasons, and then, the first one, 3 hunting seasons.
Yeah. So
yeah,
there's no gimmies. Okay. That's my point here. It still takes hard work, just like everything else. We talk about it with waterfowl hunting all the time, even if it's on private land. All right. Just because you have private land in Arkansas and you have a rice field does not mean you're shooting ducks. All right. Actually, it's harder than predicting deer because they can just fly away.
Right.
But with deer, I don't know, it's still going to be a challenge, and it really makes you, if you see the sport this way, this is why I'm trying to challenge you, I guess. If you don't see the sport that way, I challenge you to try to learn that and understand it a little bit more, because I think it gives you a higher, or what's the word I'm looking for? A different perspective on how hard it really is to shoot a big buck. You know what I mean? It's even more phenomenal when you do it on public land. But
for sure,
there's just no gimmies. There just isn't.
Mm-mm.
Well, just when you think you have it figured out too, you have something like EHD come in, and we still had a lot of deer on our
drought.
farm, but there was not the bucks this year that I was expecting. I mean, I've had some pretty decent years. The last 2 years, I just didn't have the right deer in front of me, but I had some 170s. I had a 180. But this year, my biggest deer was probably close to 160. But we had EHD. I had 2 in that 150, 160 range that were just not shooters. They were young deer. I mean, they're, you could tell by looking at them, they were not mature, I mean, and I don't believe in aging on the hoof is that accurate. In fact, most biologists struggle to do it effectively, but you can tell if a deer is 3 years and younger or older than 4 years. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like it's not like, that deer's 5.74
Right,
years old.
right.
Either I can tell that that's a young deer or it's an older deer. I don't know if it's 4 or 7, but he's mature, right? But the other, like the 2 and 3 year olds look like 2 and 3 year olds. They look no different in the body than a basket rack 8 or a basket rack 6-pointer or something. You know what I mean? Like a Forky or something like that.
Yeah, they're built like a horse.
And then you see a deer that's 5 years old, and you're like, that's a freaking deer. Like that is an old deer, right? He's jacked up. He's all pumped up on testosterone. He's a dominant deer. He's controlling the field. I mean, those are characteristics of and to me, they look noticeably different, right? I don't know if he's 5 or 8. I could care less.
Right.
But a 2.5 or a 3.5-year-old deer look noticeably different than a mature deer to me. And sometimes it's hard to tell right away, but after you see them 40 times on your trail cameras and you see them 6 times in person, you know who that deer is. Like, it's like, that's the 2.5-year-old 140-inch deer that's going to be something if it can live 2 more years, right? So I don't think you can be totally, unless you have a trail cam history with the deer. He's got a drop tine and you've seen him for the last 3 years, and you know that deer's now 6.5, and you know what I mean? Then that's a different story. But I'm not that good at it. And studies by biologists that are trained in this say it's not accurate to age that do this for a living and study how to do it. It's not accurate to judge the age of a deer. And have you guys have heard of like deer age, right?
Like in what perspective?
So Deer Age is a company that will actually take the incisors. So you can cut out the incisors.
Oh, it's a company. Okay, all right.
It's a company, and you can send in the incisors, and they look at the laminations of the calcifications on the tooth. I mean, I'm not a dentist by any means, but they can see the circumference, the circular, patterns on the deer when they look at the tooth. I don't know how they grind it down or whatever, and they can accurately tell you the age of the deer. So I found a couple deadheads on my farm. One deer was 170 inches, and I sent in the bottom incisors, and they came back and aged it at 5.5 years old. Is what they, so
that's neat.
And that's a good, like, so you want a farm, when I talk about genetics, that at 5 years they're growing 160 to 180 inch deer, because that tells you that a 5-year-old deer, you don't want that deer to have to be 7 or 6.5, or you know what I mean?
Yep.
So deer kind of max their antler growth at 6.5 ish years, some a little more, some a little less, but you don't want to, or if you could have a 4-year-old that's 170 inches, that would be better. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So it kind of gives you an idea. When I find a deadhead that's a decent rack, I'll send it in, get it tested. I've gotten 2 tested. One was 4.5. One was 4.5. It was like 150 inch, but the other one was 175 inch. Was a 5.5-year-old deer, and that's good. You want to, if a deer can live to be 5 or 6 years of age, they're kind of maxing out their potential. But and it varies a little bit, based upon the genetics of the deer and whatnot. But Deer Age is a company you can send in, and there's another company that does it too. You send in their incisors, and they tell you the age of the deer.
That's cool. That's really cool. Well, there's, I think that it goes really all the way back to when my mom was hunting, and she would just say those really big ones are different, and she knew what that looked like. And I think that, for me, the two things that you can do by not overthinking this when it comes to big deer is you can see a big rack, but when you see a deer, the actual body of a deer, and you go, son of a bitch, that is a big deer. That's a mature deer. All right. So when it makes you do that and you go from, all right, that looks like a horse, now it looks like a cow. If you just take that simple look at it, they'll have more of a cow body. Their back legs are going to be stiffer. There are some characteristics that are true on, there's going to be more sway in their back. Not every time,
Not every time. Yeah.
Yeah. Because every deer's just like people are different, the deer are too. But there's some things that are basics that you can get a good idea, I think, and, I got one right here on the wall behind me, and that thing, just, Cade, when he was here, he looked and he said, why do you got him over there and your other two Pope and Youngs over there? And I go, because I used to have him over by those two, and it made those two look like it took away from them. it made it look small. They were like, those didn't make the book, not next to him, so, but they just look different. They just do.
Yeah.
There's like a cow.
Well, and they act a little different too. And they you can, when you pick up on it, and sometimes you're wrong. I mean, but I'm sure people shoot mature deer and they go, oh shit, it's only 3 years old. Whenever because you're worked up and you're all these things that hunting's supposed to do to you. But I think, the more you hunt, the more you see 2-year-old deer compared to 4 and 5 and 6-year-old deer, you can start to say that deer looks and acts noticeably different than the other 2-year-olds. And you'll see 10 2-year-olds, and then you'll see this deer that looks different, right? Yeah. That's the different deer. That's when you start to pick those out and say, well, that's a much rarer deer. It's 40 or 50 pounds heavier. It's stockier. It's got some more personality to it. I mean, you know what I mean?
Sure.
You can tell when you're doing this for long enough. You just, and you're not right every time, but you're more right than you're not right, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I was just thinking about this. It's just, you could do the same thing with people, right? It's a lot easier to tell somebody that's 13 and they're 60, right? I mean, that's all you can go, oh, okay, that's an older person. That's a young person, but you might struggle sometimes to go, they're in the 30s or younger 40s. You know what I mean?
Right.
Same kind of thing.
Yeah, makes total sense.
So,
and that's the deer I'm after. I mean, it used to be, it's not about antler size to me. It's for me, it's shooting the most mature deer on my place, knowing that he's probably the smartest and the brightest. And now if he's a 180-inch deer, that's awesome.
Yep.
But, I want to take out the ones that don't have any more potential rather than leave the younger ones to grow, to see what happens. It's more fun,
Now, what are your thoughts on I've heard some people talk a lot about dominant does. They'll in their home range or whatever. You'll definitely see it amongst deer when they're herded up late in the year. If you see a lot of deer out in the field, you will see them as they eat establish dominance between them,
like a pecking order.
A pecking order. The does will do that. And I mean, what's your thoughts on that? I mean, because I think that nature knows how to do it, and I think that a doe with good genetics ends up being like more of a matriarch to the herd. I don't know. And then I think that deer is going to naturally seek out the best genetics of a buck. You know what I mean? Whether it's, you could say it's rack size, all the stuff, whatever it is. A doe might get bred by $5 in a season, it's 3 of them intentionally and 2 of them unintentionally, whatever.
Yeah.
But what are your thoughts on that? Like keeping those does around?
Do they exist? Yeah. So I think they exist. I mean, I think there's definitely a hierarchy and pecking order of does and bucks. But I don't know that the doe has like if you have a dominant doe, I don't know that this she'll have the effect on your screwing up your hunting like a dominant buck or a bully buck or something like that. Does that make sense? When I see it, it's typically 5, 6, 8, 10 deer in the field, and one's kind of encroaching on one space and it'll push off the other deer, but they'll just go feed somewhere else in the field, right?
Yeah.
So as long as they have an opportunity to feed. And I don't think in the bedding area it's as crucial as in like a feeding situation, whereas if you have, I've seen 2-year-old bucks that are just so spasmodic and crazy that they'll just clear an entire field, right? They'll just check every doe out and check every fawn that's literally 4 days old out, and it's like, well, that fawn's 4 days old. That fawn's not ready to breed yet, and then but it just
4 days old.
but they're just pushing every deer everywhere and just causing a stink. And it's like, man, that's a stupid ass deer just cleared the field. It's like, but so I think it's and it may be different. I don't know. And like the bedding areas, I'm sure, but on my farm, I know exactly where the deer are bedding. Like, I've walked through it a couple times or whatever, scouting, and I know where they're bedding. Like, it's like, and they have primary and secondary bedding areas, and there's always deer in this area and sometimes deer in this area. And, you can really pick those areas out. So I don't know if those, dominant does are affecting them. I'm sure they are, if a group of does come in there and they stand up and say, hey, we're over here, and they'll push them out a little bit, but does relate to safety and food, right? Mm-hmm. So they are going to bed around their primary source of food, whereas a buck, it may not be that. It may be like a secondary or tertiary bedding area behind the does, or it may be a half mile away or 3/4 of a mile away where they feel safest in some deep ass ravine somewhere, and they'll wait till dark to come feed on your farm or whatever, you know? So, and I can see that on my farm, like mid-October, all my pictures are midnight, 1 o'clock, 11:30, 2 o'clock in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning. And then as you approach, and there's some decent bucks that are out there in the middle of the night, but there's probably not enough bedding opportunities for them where they want to be, because there's a ton of does or there's other bucks or whatever. Mm-hmm. But then starting right around Halloween is where I'll start to get 7:45 photo or 8 o'clock photo or something like that, or 10 minutes before sunrise photo, or you know what I mean? It's like, so then I get a little leery about hunting that food plot, or hunting because I don't want to spook that deer that's leaving the food plot 20-30 minutes before sunrise. But then come rut, it's noon. It's like 8 o'clock, 9:30, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. It's all day long. You can see them. You know, it really is like that. And I haven't quite figured out why that is. I mean, I have a ton of bedding area on my farm. I don't know if it's lack of good bedding or if it's just too many does. Like, does are going to bed up close to the fields, and I got 5 fields, and the bucks have to bed somewhere else, or if it's just they feel comfortable other places. I mean, but I do have some decent. Like I have good bucks that'll bed on my farm. I'll see them, all day. In the wooded areas, sometimes even before the rut and after the rut. It's just, you just never know what a big old buck is thinking,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Right on, man. Well, dude, you got anything else for Dr. Buck?
I don't think so, man. I think it was, it's always super informational. And, last time, one of the big things that I left the podcast thinking about is just like how much deer need green source all year long. And like how you were talking about how if you just have corn and beans late in the season, like that's, they need more than that, because they're so browsy. And you said something similar this year or this time we had to do on the podcast. I guess it is this year too, but with just variety of landscape, and that's something else that I'm going to be thinking about more often when I'm just looking at new places to hunt or whatever,
Yeah. I think deer like variety of food source and variety of habitat. And, so if you look in the woods, you'll find scrub trees like that a lot of people don't want for valuable timber. Like, oaks are obviously good, but you can have a lot of trees, that can provide variety in the woods that deer will browse on, whether it's you hinge cut them or create bedding areas or whatever. And then with your food sources, make sure you have something green in the early hunting season, October, November, because the deer will be attracted to that green food source once everything else turns brown, because they need it they need it for their digestive systems and everything else. So they'll be hitting it like crazy.
Sure.
Yeah, man. Well, cool. Well, thank you, Mike, for taking the time to get back on here, man. We always enjoy it, and it's always good just catching up with you as friends and stuff. And
yeah, man, I want to get another update. When we get closer to hunting season,
Absolutely.
talk about where you're at and what you're seeing out there.
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime you guys want to get on here, let's do it.
All right, brother.
all right, man. Thank you so much.
I've been
See you guys. Take care.
See you, Mike.
on a midnight train. Going too fast now, think I ought to slow down. Standing in the pouring rain.